Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. We are with Dr. Cyclone, who's level 9. We got 600 and some odd XP to go to get to level 10, and we're on the Frostfire mission. I actually tried this mission at level 9, and I couldn't do it. I could not beat Frostfire. And so I think part of the problem is that I don't have enough inspiration slots here to have the inspirations I need, because you're going to need a couple break freeze, because he can freeze you at least 2 break freeze. You're going to need a couple lux, probably more than that, um, and at least a couple heals. So I feel like I need those 2 extra slots that we're going to get at level 10, plus the extra level. So I came out here and I said, let me do some street hunting, but man, 645 XP at this level takes a lot of street hunting. So what I'm going to try to do is go back into this mission. I did film the previous one, but I wasn't happy with the audio, and so we're not going to post that. We're going to do this instead. And I think in that video I was talking a little bit about GM advice that somebody else was giving, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but then I also want to talk first about my own GM advice to people who are going to run especially published adventures. So this comes by way of me thinking about what I would do if, in fact, my group team wipes against the Bulls in the Deadlands game that we're playing. This would be probably about 6 days from now. If that happens, and if they decide that they don't want to continue Deadlands, but they would like to, try something else, or at least they don't want to continue those characters, and I say, okay, well then we're going to try something else. 2 options that I'm going to give them are East Texas University or the Savage Worlds Horror Companion, which would definitely be a cosmic horror campaign, Lovecraftian, or a third option would be Call of Cthulhu. That's all cosmic horror or something similar, because if I ran ETU, I would probably run it as Miskatonic University, which is the Lovecraft college in his books, and do more of a cosmic horror based ETU rather than what they have in the Degrees of Horror campaign. And so so that's three of the options that I'm giving them are going to be, kind of Lovecraftian horror. And so if that's true, if I do any of those, then I'm probably going to want to use some source material from the Call of Cthulhu book, whether I use actual Call of Cthulhu or whether I play from the Horror Companion, or we use East Texas University, which will probably use some stuff from Horror Companion also. Any of those options is going to I'm going to need to be looking into the Call of Cthulhu source material and possibly their adventures. And one of the reasons I would look at their adventures more so than, say, if I were making D&D game or something, is that I have never run a Call of Cthulhu or Cosmic Horror adventure, so I'm not entirely sure, how would you compose these adventures. And so I started looking at the Mansions of Madness, Doorways to Darkness, Gateways of Terror. These are all for early beginning players and GMs, and I was reading through, just skimming through it. And so I thought, I can't use them as written, and I feel like almost no adventures that are published are used to be written. So I want to give you a little bit of sort of scrapper's advice on how to use published adventures so that you don't actually... Why do I keep missing an altar that I have an 83% chance to hit? And of course that knocked me right into this guy's aggro range, right? So the problem with most published adventures, and Luke Hart has talked about this as well, is that they're not written to be run. They're written to be read. They're not written to be playable by the GM at the table. They're very disorganized. They're very hard to follow. the Call of Cthulhu ones are just as bad, at least the ones that I was just reading tonight. Right? You open up the thing and it's got a title. You know, The Mystery at End House. And it starts out by saying this is an adventure for 2 to 4 new players and a new GM. Right? And then it gives you a page and a half of all this backstory. The story begins in England in the 1860s when blah, 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 blah. Right? And I'm sitting there going, okay, but what's the adventure about? What is the adventure about? Next paragraph. Following these events in England, some people emigrated to the United States and blah, 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 blah. But what is the adventure about? Right? Tell me what's the adventure about. This is an adventure about the players going to an isolated hotel and finding out that there are zombies there. That's what I need to know to decide whether I'm going to run it or not. So you have all of this text. You have to read it like a short story. And what I used to say, and what I used to try to do, was take that text. I certainly did this with some of the Deadland games, so like as of recently, okay? Take the text, turn it into outlines and bulleted lists and note cards and things like that that I can use to run the adventure. You can do that, and that will maybe make it runnable. But the problem is it's never going to run as written anyway because the players aren't going to do what the writers of the adventure think the players are going to do. My players never do what the writers of the adventure think they're going to do. Because usually the writers of the adventure expect the players to just bull their way into a story and be stupid. And in fact, in the Savage Worlds Horror Companion, there is actually a setting option that I will use with my players in horror that is called playing to the genre, or playing into the genre, or something like that. Playing to the tropes. I can't remember exactly what it's called. But they say in there that in horror novels and movies and stuff, the characters will frequently break up. The party splits up. They go by themselves to investigate the weird sound in the basement. Right? They trust somebody who's obviously shady and sketchy. Right? And players are too smart for this. They've seen all the movies. They know all the tropes. They know that the person who goes alone to investigate the sound in the basement is the one who gets killed, right? Everybody knows that. So I'm not going to go alone and investigate a sound in the basement because my character doesn't want to get killed, right? It's stupid to do that. So in Savage Worlds, for that setting, the playing into the genre setting rule, the GM offers to provide bennies to players who play into the genre, who play into the theme, right? So that if you go investigate the sound in the sound in the basement by yourself, I'll give you a benny for that, right? If you have those weird medical condition that you hide from the party instead of going to the doctor and getting it checked out after being bitten by a strange monster, again, I'll give you a benny because you're playing into the genre tropes, right? You're playing into the theme that we're doing. But players are usually too smart for that. And so one of the problems you have in any kind of an adventure, but certainly in horror games, right? Like the scenarios of horror games, Deadlands is definitely guilty of this, and it looks to me on quick reading like Call of Cthulhu is as well, is they assume the players, without bennies, are going to, by default, play into the genre tropes and do stupid stuff like go investigate the sound in the basement by themselves, which players generally aren't going to do. Right now, maybe they will if you give them bennies for it, but Call of Cthulhu doesn't have bennies. And so you have this situation where the written adventure is going to expect the players to do things that smart players won't do. And this dovetails into what I think I talked about in the video that I didn't show you, where I was in here before. And that is that the players, this was a new GM on D&D Beyond who gave advice, and he said one of his bits of advice is that the players will always do the thing you aren't prepared for. And somebody misinterpreted it and meant the thing you didn't prepare a whole dungeon for. And he said, no, that's not what I mean. What I mean is the thing you don't expect them to do that you're sure they won't do, that's the thing they're going to do. And the thing you think they're going to do is the thing they won't do. And so he said you need to be prepared for them to blindside you because that's what they will do. And so if you think about these written adventures, right, the published adventures that the companies make, right, the companies assume that the players are going to do the obviously stupid thing for whatever reason. Bull in the China shop, the most coarse, non-subtle thing that could be done, that's what they assume the players will do. And a good group of players, well, they're going to do smarter things than that. My players are too smart for that stuff. And so so that's one of the problems with these types of adventures is that they're written like a story, and that the players are the protagonists of the story that the author of the adventure wrote, and the author of the adventure thinks that the players are going to do the thing that they expected. We've leveled up, so now we should be able to take Frostfire. And all the rest of these guys are going to be cake because they're green, but Frostfire was red or orange. I think it was orange to me, so now he'll be yellow to me. But these guys shouldn't have any chance against me now because they're green. So then the question is, so what do you do? Right? And I think the answer to that is don't try, what I've learned is don't try to run the adventure as written. Because the players are never going to do what the writer of the adventure expects them to do. Instead, what you should do is use the adventure as an inspiration for what you're going to do. You can use like the boss and whatever his plan is maybe, and the adventure location and the maps and that sort of thing, but don't try to run the scenes, right? Like a lot of these adventures, and Savage Worlds does this, they're very guilty of this. They write the adventure like acts of a play. Act 1, Scene 1, Act 1, Scene 2, Act 1, Scene 3, Act 2, Scene 1, Act 2, Scene 2, Act 3, Scene 1. The players aren't going to go through it in that order. They're not going to think of things in the order that the book expects. They're going to constantly be doing things that the book didn't expect. And so you can't run it that way. But what you can do, and this is what I did in the Hard Headstone Hill because my players went way off script, is you're just using the content of the book for inspiration. So, for example, in one of the adventures in, I think it was Doors to Darkness, I can't remember which one, outside of the town of Kingsport, which is one of Lovecraft's towns, there's a hotel. I don't have any idea what's going on in this hotel, even after I skimmed through it, because it was just so obtusely written. I have to read the whole thing like from top to bottom to understand what the heck is going on. But I'm probably not going to use anything other than the fact that there's a hotel outside of Kingsport, which is part of Lovecraft Country, right? Now, one of the reasons I'm interested in this hotel is that in the Horror Companion, much like in the Fantasy Companion, they have stronghold rules. They're called lodges in Horror Companion, and castles or strongholds or something in Fantasy Companion. These are rules for the players building bases. And the base levels up with the party, so each time the party members get advances, the base gets an advance, and they can pick something cool to do with the base. And so you randomly roll for like something good about the base and something negative about the base at the beginning, and then you figure out its location and how big it is and so on. And I thought, well, this would make a really cool lodge, right? And a hotel that is just outside the town of Kingsport, where a bunch of crap will happen because it is Lovecraft Country. They're within a fairly easy drive of Arkham and Miskatonic University, fairly easy drive of Innsmouth, of Dunwich, and all of these, and Ipswich, and all these other towns that are mentioned, Ipswich being a real town, in Massachusetts that are mentioned in Lovecraftian lore. So this is absolutely perfect. And so if I can find a way to get them to go to the hotel and then have weird crap happen in the hotel, right? Then, but the hotel is like abandoned by the end of the story, then maybe, possibly, perhaps I can have that become their base, their lodge, and they can work out of that hotel. But I don't know what I'm going to do with the story yet. That will depend on, you know, what they wrote and what I can do with it. I'm thinking of possibly the idea, especially if the players are a bunch of academics, maybe there's a conference or a convention scheduled at this hotel. And if I make sure that the owner dies and is some kind of a lone person who doesn't have any family, and the nobody owns the hotel, maybe they can take over the hotel, or perhaps the conference is some kind of a red herring. Think about here in City of Heroes how there's an actual mission where it's a game convention, but it's kind of like a conference, right? And the villains use the conference to trick the comic book fans to come to the conference to become like prisoners. So that's kind of goofy here because it always takes place in Craze Folly, and it's like, why would anybody go to a comic book convention in Craze Folly? Or a gaming convention. I think it was a gaming convention. But I could cause there to be some kind of a conference at a hotel outside of Kingsport, and when you get there, well, they're they're just trying to get sacrifices for some ritual they're going to do, right? And so they end up fighting some cultists, which isn't super dangerous, and encountering something weird, and maybe gaining a ritual spell that they can use in a future adventure. And it turns out that the hotel has been abandoned for years and nobody owns it. And then at the end of the adventure, they could maybe take it over. And so I thought that might be like a really cool way to start things off. It's using possibly the hotel map, the location, right? The fact that there's horror going on there. Maybe I can use some of the NPCs from the hotel because there's a bunch of them. But the other lodgers, right? The other people who are there. But if I'm having it be some sort of a science conference, then maybe not. I don't know if that would work. I don't know if all of the PCs would go to such a conference. Maybe I could have one of the PCs' car breaks down and they see the hotel on the side of the road and they go to the hotel because they have to wait overnight until their car is fixed, or I don't know. But I like the idea of having a hotel and having that become their lodge in the future. I think it's a cool idea. So what I'm taking is the germ of the idea and going, okay, I'm going to now do something else. In Call of Cthulhu, was it Call of Cthulhu? Wait, no. No. It was Shadow Dark, because it's one of the games I might do with my group if they want to go back to fantasy. The only one I would be try in fantasy would be Shadow Dark. There's a bunch of Shadow Dark adventures that third parties have made that are available for Foundry VTT, and to go with the Shadow Dark module. And one of the things I noticed about these, Shadow Dark is meant to be kind of simplified so that you don't have all these complicated. The idea is you don't have these big giant novels to read in order to run an adventure. And I don't know what the official maps are like, but the third party group that made these maps is all of the maps say that there's a layer of dungeon key or whatever that's actually on the map itself, right? So if we look at like this map, right, where you have the different rooms, imagine if this room was keyed. Now in a lot of adventures, they have the map on one page, and then all of the rooms have numbers in them, right? And then on a facing page or multiple pages past there, you have a series of map key, it's called, right, where they key it out and they give you two paragraphs about each room or whatever, and you have to like flip to that page. This is room 1, and so you have to flip through the book to the page that's got room 1 on it, and then room 2 is here, and room 3, and room 4, and room 5. And so that can be very hard to run. And what I end up doing is what I have ended up doing in Foundry, because it's such a hassle to go into the compendium, the journal, and try to look stuff up. It's just not convenient to do while I'm running a session, is that I go and put stuff from the key directly on the map, and I make the layer invisible to the players. And what I've started doing making my own maps is I don't even make a key in the journal. I just write everything directly on the map as a little text box, and only I can see it, right? And it seems like this third party that's made these Shadow Dark adventures has done the same thing. And all of the map keys, I think they have journals if you want more information, but all of the map keys are right on the map. So you can see right there what's in every room, and it tells you, right? So my point about this is, if I'm going to run an adventure, I'm going to make the hotel. I will just put the key right there on the map. I'm not going to need journals. If there are tokens, I'll just slap them on the map so that I can click on them with NPC tokens. I know they're right there. I'll just make them invisible to the players and then reveal them when necessary. And this way, I'm playing the game by looking at the map rather than constantly flipping through journals trying to figure out what's supposed to be in the different parts of the map. And so what I argue, what I'm advising, is to use adventures, use the maps as a resource, but write the key on the map and put whatever you want on the map. Don't worry about what's supposed to be there. Put what you want in there. And also, don't worry about the details of the adventure as written. Rather, look at this, double missing with 87% to hit. Rather than trying to run the adventure exactly as written, use it as inspiration, right? Instead of thinking of it as an adventure, since they're written as novels and short stories and novellas, think of it as one. Imagine instead of an adventure, you're reading The Shadow over Innsmouth and trying to figure out as a GM, how would I turn this into an adventure, right? And then do the same thing to the published adventure that you would have to do to the short story, the Lovecraft short story, The Shadow over Innsmouth, which would be that you would have to take what Lovecraft gives you as a narrative and make some notes on it and then turn it into your own story. You wouldn't be able to run it as written because it's a novella or a long short story. And so it has a single protagonist, it has certain villains, right? So what you'd have to do is take the inspiration that there's this decrepit town on the coast of Massachusetts that is infested with these deep ones, which are these half fish and toad, half human beings who are, this is such a cool room, who are malevolent, and they use humans as sacrifices. And the players get stuck there. Maybe their bus breaks down or their car breaks down in the town of Innsmouth. They have to stay in a hotel, and while they stay in the hotel, somebody's going to try to break into their room and capture them and make them a sacrifice and take them under the ocean, right? And then, just go from there. Have the appropriate maps for taking them under the ocean, have a map for the hotel, have a map for the town of Innsmouth, right? And see what happens. Maybe they escape and run away. Maybe they get captured and you take them underwater and they have to escape from and do an underwater escape. Right? Think of a couple possibilities. What happens if they get captured? What happens if they kill the guys? What happens if they run away? Right? And just think of possibilities and make the right maps that you need for those areas. And then don't try to fit it. Don't try to fit it into a pre-made story. I mean, this is part of the problem, is that these guys have written the equivalent of a short story or a novella or something, and they're trying to make this play, right? Have act 1, 2, 3, have a beginning, a middle, and an end that's all pre-written. You can't predict what the players are going to do, and as this one newer GM said, he learned, or she learned, that the players are going to do the exact opposite of what you think they're going to do. Whatever you're not prepared or expecting them to do, that's what they will do. So you can't write a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. At least for me, that doesn't work. Right? And that's what all of these published adventures are. So my recommendation is read through it, get inspiration from it the same way you would get inspiration from an actual story or novel, right? You read Lord of the Rings, and now you get inspiration from it. And if you wanted to turn, say, The Hobbit into an adventure, well, what would that look like? The Hobbit turned into an adventure would look like you get a treasure map to a mountain guarded by a monster, and there's a long overland adventure with lots of obstacles in between, and you would make up some obstacles in between. It wouldn't be trolls and goblins, it would be other things. And you would maybe have them encounter some characters who could possibly be allies depending on how they act, or could be enemies. And then when they get to the mountain, they're going to have to somehow overcome this monster that's too powerful for them to kill directly. Those are the basic story beats of The Hobbit, and you could just use those to produce an adventure, right? And that's what I would recommend, that you do the same thing with the published adventures that you would do with The Hobbit to turn it into an adventure. You're not going to follow the beats exactly. You're just going to try and use the inspiration to give you some ideas of challenges, obstacles, and adventures that you can put in the path of the heroes. And so Scrapper's advice is don't try and run any adventures as written. Now, the one exception I'm going to say is I don't know about Shadowdark. It's possible that Shadowdark can be run as adventures can be run as written, because the book is very outliney on purpose, right? It's written as bulleted lists and very short, like 1 and 2 sentence paragraphs, and mostly almost like an outline with fairly large font. In fact, one person said it's one of the only rule books that he's ever seen that you can actually read the whole thing on a phone without squinting and barely being able to read. We got a boss here, so we're definitely going to want that. And we'll do that, and there we go. So part of what Kelsey tries to do is make it easy to reference the rules. Kelsey Dion being the author of Shadowdark. So it may be that she did the same thing, or the people who work with her do the same thing in the adventures, and they're more like an outline, or maybe they're even all on one page. You know, I've seen a few adventure maps that are like this, where it's like a 10-room dungeon or something, and all of the key is on the same page as the map, and there's just little call outs for what's in each room, like little word balloons from a comic book. And that maybe you can run as written, but that's not a novel, right, type story. That's just they're just giving you room ideas of what's in each room. So you think about like the way I did Dungeon 24, that one, or whatever it was called, that where you're supposed to be running like a room a day for doing a mega dungeon, that I did for a month or two and then stopped. That's kind of what I was doing, right? I was just rolling up what's in the room, like what room is it, what's in the room, and it was just, okay, there's this monster or this treasure or this weird object or this trap, right? And exactly how it was connected to the other rooms, I wasn't going to work out. We'll figure that out as we go. And and the idea is that what I think I don't want to do is write the story and have the players experience it. I think it's better to just give some basic seeds and let us as a group, me with the players, create the story at the table, right? And so that's what I'm going to try to do in the future. All right, so now we're at Frostfire. I am a higher level now, but we haven't leveled up. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause it here. Wait, hang on. Not yet. Let's go down here. We're going to finish everybody else off, but I'm going to pause it here, and when we get to Frostfire, I'm going to go out and I'm going to actually level up so I can get my next power and also get the additional slots. And we're going to get at least one more luck and possibly two, and maybe another break free, because he kept hitting me with his mez and freezing me, and I can't do anything about that other than break free. And at one point, because he also summons a little Jack Frost guy, and that guy can also mez, they overwhelmed my single break free of Mez defense, and I had to use 2 at once, and then when the first one wore off, I died. So, we don't want that to happen. So these guys are trivial, so we're just going to just take them out, but when it comes to Jack Frost, yeah, we're going to have to be careful with him even at level 10, and I don't know if I can beat him. So I face planted twice against him. So this character's record of not face planting is already over. At least it wasn't a stupid face plant, right? I knew he was there. I had inspirations. I was ready for him as best I could. It's just that this character, because he's resistance set, right? This is again the resistance versus defense. He's a resistance set, so he doesn't have dodge, which means every single mez landed on me. And that's why they were able to overwhelm me. So I'm going to go out, I'm going to get leveled up, and then I will bring you guys back when we're ready to fight Frostfire, and I'll show you what I did for the level up. Alright folks, we're back. We got the energized power, which increases health. It has taken me like 20 minutes, because I flew all the way out, which was like 3 levels. I flew all the way out, I leveled up, I flew all the way back with this thing off, and when I turned it on, I realized I forgot to get these extra inspirations. Had to go back and get them. Not an option to be without them. So this particular battle against Frostfire causes 2 problems with this character who is not a defense-based set. And so they're not missing me. One is the mezes. I almost bought another mez, but I realized the other real problem I was having is that Frostfire causes slow, right? He slows you down. And so I don't know if I'm going to be able to even beat him. I may try to pull him out here. You got all these other buddies of his. Oh, these guys we got to deal with them. You got all these other buddies of his, and with the ice, right? You're sliding all over the place. I don't normally fight hovering or flying. I hate to do it because there's no friction to hovering, and so it's just I find it very awkward. But in this case, it's probably useful because I won't slide everywhere. Now, most of his buddies are green cons, but that guy is a boss, so there's a second boss in there. And then there are guys in the back, too. So let's take these guys out first. So why didn't I take another attack power? Well, first of all, I like to do it evenly, and it was our turn to do a defense power. But also, I felt like Energize would give me a third heal. So it's like getting an extra inspiration in the tray when we don't have enough room in the tray to begin with. I thought that was sort of worth it. And also, the next power available was this Intensify, which is just a build-up. Build-up is nice, but it lasts like 10 seconds, and then it won't recharge for the rest of the battle, especially once he starts slowing me. So I feel like that's not the good play. Energize will only work once too, but at least it will add to hit points. It's like another one of these. So I don't think we can stop the rest of these guys from coming at me. I want to go to the door and pull the famous doorway pull. And the reason I want to do that is so that I don't get stuck in this room, and that if I have to retreat, I can retreat right back to the elevator. Let's see if I can do a doorway pull to these guys. He is the closest, it looks like. Nope, Frostfire's the closest. Alright, let's lay down a storm cell right here. Okay, and then we're going to pull back and make them come to me. Time for these. So that's giving him trouble now. That ice slide. This is working okay so far. Storm cell right here. Now you see how slowed I am. Break free. We might survive this, maybe. Try to stack the defense a little bit more. The guys behind him didn't come. See how slowed I am, though? Storm cell again. Just make sure it's still working. Try to get away from Jack Frost. And we got him. Okay. So that should cause me to survive this. What the heck just hit me? Oh, this guy. Alright, I'm not as afraid of them because they can't slow me. Storm cell there. Blow them away. I mean, the mission's over. We don't have to fight these guys, but we will. So that's the first time I've ever tried to pull Jack Frost out of the room. I guess that's a better strategy than what I normally do, which is go in there and fight him in the room and deal with all the ice, which is probably stupid. I thought all of these guys were going to come at me. I'm really surprised they didn't. And there's Energize. Gets us 60 hit points. Just take a look. This heal gets us 60. So Energize unenhances is good as a small heal inspiration. So it'll be really good when we have it enhanced. And that is the end of the mission. So let's call Flux. And we get some XP. And we're introduced to a new contact. And we got... What enhancement did we get? Cord. It's useless to me. This is of no use. That's recharge, right? It doesn't really help much. At 12th level, we will get some new enhancements. So guys, this is a fairly short episode, but I guess since we finished this story arc, this is a good place to cut. And we'll have a new episode for level 10 and working with Julius the Troll and fighting the trolls in the next episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and if you have any advice yourselves on how to deal with using published adventures to make them, to lighten the cognitive load and make them easier on the mind so that we can actually run them, please feel free to drop your comments down below. I'll be happy to have your assistance as I try to figure out how I want to run some of these pre-written adventures in Call of Cthulhu and other games. So I hope you have some advice for me, and if people want to post stuff, I will listen to it, read it, and maybe make another video about it if there's a reason to talk about it. So please drop comments down below about how you actually run your dungeons and adventures when you run published games. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes with the Sentinel.